plundering of the American people. The other day I read an article written by the great representative from Texas, Ron Paul. He made more sense to me than anybody else. And instead of me trying to paraphrase what Congressman Paul had to say, we have him live on the program now. Representative Paul, it's a real honor to have you. Welcome to the Savage Nation.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Congressman, you made it very, very plain. You said if we keep spending at current levels, we could just simply save $400 billion in the next few years, not by cutting anything, but just controlling spending. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, if 4 years or 5 years ago we just had frozen the budget, it would have be balanced by now. But the big charade in Washington is these trillions and trillions of dollars that they're cutting. We're going to cut 5. No, let's cut 4. No, let's cut 5. There are no cuts at all. There are always just cuts in the proposed increases. So nobody really has considered any cuts whatsoever. There's a few bills going around. One that I would support, even though it doesn't do enough. It just cut the budget 1% from last year. After 5 or 6 years, the budget would be balanced. But no, there's no serious intent to cut. And I think you're sort of right about passing that bill. That didn't calm the markets. And just think of what they were telling us before we passed the bill. We had to raise the debt limit or the markets would crash. So we raised the debt limit and the markets crashed. I think it indicates that they're going to continue the spending as ever. They're not going to default on paying the interest on these debts that we have, but they're going to default by just printing a lot of money. People are going to lose their value of their currency, and that's the way they liquidate debt.
Congressman Ron Paul wrote this. He said, the cuts that they were discussing are illusory, and they're not really cuts. And he said it was akin to a family so-called saving $100,000 in expenses by deciding not to buy a Lamborghini and instead getting a fully loaded Mercedes when really their budget dictates that they need to stick with their perfectly serviceable Honda. Do you believe, though, that the market decline today, the big 5% decline today, is directly related to Wall Street being very nervous about this budget debacle, or certainly there's institutional trading and things of that nature involved as well, aren't there?
Yeah, I think it's more to it. Sometimes markets are looking for excuses. When there's an excuse and it starts down, maybe the market, I don't believe the market was ever worth that much. The recovery here these last several years was artificial. It was just the Fed making this, desperate effort to reinflate the bubble and created all that money, QE1 and QE2, and creating trillions of dollars and bailing out the rich and the Wall Streets and the banks. Yeah, they had a lot of cash. They were getting cash for free from the Fed, and they were able to buy Treasury bills for that, and it made it look like the market was good. But it wasn't real growth. The jobs weren't coming back. The standard of living was going down, and the deficit was exploding. So I think it's all those things put together. And the main problem we have in dealing with this crisis is nobody in Washington wants to admit a cold, hard fact. This country's bankrupt. If you're bankrupt, you have to do something about it. You just can't, go further into debt. Debt is the problem. So they say, well, I guess the first thing we need to do is increase the debt limit, $2.4 trillion, and that's supposed to help. It made no sense whatsoever to me.
Ron Paul is a congressman. He is a candidate for the presidency of the United States of America. He makes more sense to me than almost any other candidate. And he did a great article the other day on it was entitled "When a Cut is Not a Cut." And we put it up on michaelsavage.com. And all he said was, if we simply kept spending at current levels, that would save $400 billion in the next few years. But Congress didn't even want to do that. They actually wanted to increase the debt. And there is the chickens came home to roost in plain English. The Obama supporters are saying it had nothing to do with the budget deal. I say that had the market gone up 500 points today, you can bet they'd be all over the media saying, you see that? The market responded to the great Obama. So they have to take it when they created it. We'll be right back with Ron Paul on the Savage Nation.
Savage.
Welcome back to the Savage Nation. We're talking about today's stock market downturn, 5%. It's another $800 billion off the value of U.S. equities. That's a huge day. It's stocks plunged in their single worst day since the '08 financial crisis that gave us Barack Obama. The fact of the matter is we have with us a gentleman who knows something about what's really going on. Congressman Ron Paul of Texas, and he wrote a great article the other day called "When a Cut is Not a Cut." And Congressman, welcome back to the Savage Nation. A real pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Now, you know, your article is strange to me because your title was "When a Cut is Not a Cut." Now, you would know what a cut is, being an obstetrician by training, correct? No, I do trust people who are top flight professionals who go into politics as opposed to people who have only been in politics. And I would expect that you would know something more about the realities of what's going on than people who've been under the spell of lobbyists their entire life. In plain English, for the millions of people listening to this show, Congressman Paul, if you were president today, what would you do with regard to the budget?
Balance the budget. Demand that they balance the budget and do it by stopping the spending. And if you don't do that, you just make the problem that much worse. But it's a little bit bigger than that because the system is built in on this whole monetary system where the Fed creates money out of thin air. And you have to stop doing that because that's just what causes the debt, the deficits to pile on, and it also causes the malinvestment. It causes the bubble. So you cannot address this unless you understand how the financial bubble occurs and then allow the mistakes to be corrected. And they won't allow that to happen. All the people who were making a lot of money and went into bankruptcy, we bailed them out. So you have to allow bankruptcy to occur. So we did everything wrong in 2008 by bailing out the banks. Then we went and we created a new bubble. And that's why these financial companies now are in so much trouble because all they were doing was sucking in all this money that the Fed was creating, and the Fed was buying up all this debt. And guess what? The average person, the middle class, suffered from that. They're the ones who lost their jobs and lost their houses. So we have to have a new monetary system, and we have to immediately balance the budget. And that is not an easy task because if the people don't understand it and understand it's in their best interest, it won't happen. But right now, a growing number of people are starting to realize that these deficits don't help them, that the government is inept. The government can't provide welfare from cradle to grave because the system is broke. And I think that's good news, that they're waking up and realizing that we have to have big changes in order to solve this problem.
Right. Entitlement is what? Who entitled anybody to everything? But look, today, B of A down 7.4%, J.P. Morgan Chase down 4.9%, Citigroup down 6.58%, Wells Fargo down 5.7%. These are all financial stocks, and many of these benefited from TARP and some of the other bailout instruments. So why do you suppose they were hit so hard all of a sudden? Is it because they're in trouble again?
Yeah, they probably are because it was artificial and they were enjoying the bubble once again. They were the beneficiaries of all that money. The average person didn't get that money. Matter of fact, I asked Bernanke one day, I said, these trillions of dollars, you could have given every single person in this country $16,000, but you gave it to the big corporations and it didn't help the economy. It helped the big banks and all, but they're in the same trouble again. So, it was artificial. And that's why you cannot have and allow the Federal Reserve to manipulate and do the central economic planning. That's what they are. They're central economic planners, and you can't do that. Not in a free market. If you believe in free markets and market economy, you can't expect somebody like the Federal Reserve to do central economic planning. They just go from one bubble to another. It was a NASDAQ bubble, then a housing bubble, then a financial bubble, and eventually what happens is the bond bubble, the dollar bubble collapses, and that's going to be the big one. Everybody is frightened today, and they went and they bought Treasury bills and they buy dollars. But that is a bubble too. And when the panic comes and they leave the dollar and go into real assets, that's when the whole world knows that a new monetary system is on the horizon because this one will not last. And I think we're approaching it. That's how you have days like this are warning signs that big crash is coming for the dollar.
But do you, Congressman Paul, do you agree with me that there is definitely an emotional reaction in the market today to Obama's ignoring the realities of our financial system by increasing the deficit rather than holding the line? Don't you think this has something to do with what he did the other day?
Well, I don't think you can sort out the emotions from reality. Yeah, they get emotional, and that's what panics are all about. But in reality, it's logical. Sometimes emotions are very, very important. But it's not only emotions. They're reacting to some hard, cold facts that what he's been doing and the way he's been spending and the way he wants to punish anybody who's making profits, yes, those are facts, and people are reacting logically to this, and then at times they get a bit emotional about it, but it's justified.
I know you have to go in a few seconds, but I've come up with a couple of ideas. Social Security, don't you think the retirement age needs to be raised?
Yeah, something has to be done because the money that was put in there has been already spent. So if you're going to try to salvage it, you have to do that. But, they're already working very hard to cheat the recipients. Indirectly, they should be more honest about it and raise the age and do those kind of things. But they don't get cost of living increases. They're already proposing that they change the CPI calculation once again, and therefore they're going to get less purchasing power, even though they may get the same amount of money. But if there's going to be a long-term correction, yes, you'd have to raise the retirement age and do some other things. But I would like to do so much cutting elsewhere in the budget that I'd like to see young people get the chance to opt out. We talk about opting out of Obamacare. Why shouldn't young people say, look, government's not very good at giving me my insurance, whether it's medical insurance or retirement insurance? The young people I talk to seem to agree. They don't believe for a minute that this government is going to provide them with a retirement benefit when they're 65. They can't even get a job, so they're willing to assume responsibility for themselves and just stay out of it. But if that were to be done, you'd have to cut a lot of spending in other places.
Representative Ron Paul, I know you've got to run, and I really do appreciate you joining us today on this dark day in the markets. Thanks for being with us on the Savage Nation, and good luck in your presidential aspirations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, it was very, very interesting.